Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. It's a pleasure to be with you once again. I'm a Vedic astrologer located out of New Bedford, Massachusetts. I have served as I was almost going to say I've served time. I have served as the president of the Council of Vedic Astrology, vice president of the Council of Vedic Astrology. I have also served as on the board of the American Council of Vedic Astrology and have been an instructor of astrology at Kepler College, the American College of Vedic Astrology, Dara Academy, and I also teach one-on-one. I do have exciting news. I have officially opened my school. You can contact me at either of those contact points for more information. Classes will not officially start until probably June at the earliest or September at the more reasonable expectation. I've been a Vedic astrologer for 32 years. Vedic astrology was what I started with. I learned Western astrology after Vedic, but I was interested in astrology since the time I was around 9 or 10 years old, but just never found either the time or the inclination to get into it until I started doing transcendental meditation and also learned pulse diagnosis, and then took up Jyotish through the Tian folks about a year after I started meditating. So a lot of things came together sort of like at the same time. I learned tarot around roughly within the same time span, within about 2 to 3 years, and Reiki about 4 years later, and got initiated as a Kriya Yoga priest in our Kriya Yoga Swami in 1996, I believe it was, and initiated into the Kriya Yoga lineage in 2002 or thereabouts. I have, so I can teach you Reiki, I can teach you astrology, I can teach you meditation, I can teach you a variety of things I've learned through the years. So if you want to contact me about lessons, you please feel more than welcome to do so. Again, my contact information is 508-525-0001. I still do readings. I do readings pretty much every day of the week. And I do them mostly through Zoom now. And that's partially because my location is temporarily shut down for renovations, and it will be open in the summertime again. So also, we are planning, a book is being written right now. It's been a book that's been 20 years really in the making, or more than that, actually. And I'll also have more videos coming together connected with music and politics and a variety of other, and also systems of thought. I prefer systems of thought more to politics, because politics, I think, essentially is emotionally too heated for people nowadays. I think they're starting to look at it just from reaction buttons more so than from conscious, clear thought. And we need conscious, clear thinkers nowadays, not people who react just emotionally to things. Not that there's anything wrong with emotions, but it doesn't lead to good policy. It doesn't lead to good practice. Okay, so that's my personal bias. It's not, I have nothing against passionate people. I love people who are passionate and emotional about their issues, but I find that cool thinking is really the way to get things done, and really the way to move forward. But that's my bias. So I'm going to pull up a chart. We're going to look this week at what happened with the Supreme Court, what happened with military leaks, and a little bit connected with the upcoming elections, and at least in the United States. And also, there are a variety of things around the world happening, which are sort of like off the radar, because essentially what happens with media in this country is we get one or two issues that become like big news items, and so our attention, and we lose sight of the larger world. And I think that's sort of a flaw in the way that our news works. But again, news is essentially about what's hot at the moment. So I'm going to share a screen with you, and pull up a chart for. Okay, so this is a world map. I want to get rid of that share. Let's see, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Okay, so let's see if we can get the share up. Get off this slide. And I'm going to stop the share again and get it back up again. And it's because I don't trust this. I've had experience with this showing black surfaces. So when I started talking before, we had moon in the first house. So this is a second kind of a setup. But we have, so this is kind of an interesting period in time in which we have quite a bit of planetary activity happening right now. We have a Jupiter-Venus conjunction in Pisces, which is really sort of a pivotal point in the chart. We have an exalted sign, so Jupiter and Venus are in their own signs, and their exalted sign. Saturn just entered its own sign a couple of days ago, and Sun has been in Aries for a while. It's about 6 days away from exact conjunction with Rahu, the North Lunar Node, and that causes scandals or upset or disruption to occur, especially in terms of governments. We have Mercury in Taurus, which is actually a nice placement for trade, but by the middle of next week, it'll go retrograde. So that'll cause it to go back towards Aries, and it'll enter Aries within about 2 weeks' time. So there'll be a lot of talk about scandal in the government, a lot of talk about deception in the government. And that doesn't just apply to the United States, that applies to the entire world. The other thing is we have moon in its own sign, so there's a lot of thought, a lot of attention focused on women right now. Okay, so that's, I don't usually like to assign planetary interests to genders or gender specific, because then I say, well, you know, we have the sun focused, then it's a lot of attention on men, and that's not always the case. But in this particular case, it is, because the moon's in Cancer. It's in Punarvasu Nakshatra, I believe. Let's see, no, it's in Pusha. It's made its way into Pusha, and Pusha is considered to be one of the more auspicious nakshatras for starting anything. And Pusha is essentially is considered the best nakshatra to start anything except for marriages. And that goes back to something that happened in the Mahabharata, where the seven brothers married Draupadi under Pushya Nakshatra. So that's the source of that particular belief. And essentially, but the moon in the 12th house does create problems for women. It'll mean a loss to women in some regard. Now, I want to talk just for a few minutes about Roe versus Wade in the United States, and about military, and about the U.S. intelligence coming out and saying that they were openly giving aid to the Ukraine in order to kill off Russian generals. So both stories are interesting in that they're both leaks, more or less. They're both they both represent a leaky communication system. And I think the more significant one is really, so the military one is essentially, it's kind of like Rahu revealing the government is doing something it shouldn't do. Okay, or let's put it this way: it's something that we all know the governments do, but nobody ever really brags about it that much. Nobody ever talks about it that much. And the leak in the Supreme Court is actually more interesting because, number one, it affects a huge percentage of our population. Number two, it's literally unprecedented. It's something we've had very few, if any, leaks within my memory about the decision that was coming down from the Supreme Court. And I find it interesting that this story was leaked. So essentially, this Mars, now, again, keep in mind, whenever Mars and Mercury are engaged with each other, there's a certain amount of deception involved. Whenever Rahu is connected with the sun, there's a certain amount of deception involved. Okay, so we have a couple of indicators for deception, and or betrayal. Let's put it that way. So Mars aspecting Mercury, you'll get kind of a pump to the news media. So Mercury rules the news media. I think you're going to see them actually next week when Mercury goes retrograde. Not really confessing that he got some things wrong. And like I said, this wouldn't necessarily be true just in the United States. It would be true around the world. And also, after when the sun leaves the company of Rahu and goes into the lunar eclipse, it's still involved with Rahu to a certain extent because they're really, Rahu's at 28 degrees. The sun will be at around, we'll look at the eclipse chart in a few minutes, at around 2 degrees. That's essentially a conjunction. And I think it'll be interesting, but in terms of law and law practices and legal issues coming up, this eclipse happened at around 16 degrees of Aries. So that would affect government and law because we have Libra involved as well. Libra is connected with law or political activity. Also, one of the things that's fascinating about this is not that there was a legal issue raised in both cases, but the fact that essentially both sides are going to claim the high road. So essentially, in Roe versus Wade, in the Supreme Court issue, the high road claimed will be that it's taking away women's rights that have been established for 60 years. Okay, if you look at the other perspective, and believe me, I'm pro-choice. So this isn't something that I'm really enthusiastic about, but the Roe versus Wade case, and this was something that Justice Ginsburg had said, was basically it was basically overreach. It was basically and that's what the Supreme Court argument that's been leaked so far is the point is trying to make. Rather than deciding the individual case, they made a blanket judgment that that not that particular case was without precedent, but every case was, or not that particular case was affected, but essentially every case of its kind was affected. And that's been a conservative position, gosh, for years. so going back into a little bit of ancient history, the Warren Court made a lot of findings which have become established in law in this country, and many people think they essentially overstepped their bounds. They made a lot of decisions, and the Berger Court essentially followed that because Berger was not an effective Chief Justice, and this is based upon an old Woodward and Bernstein book I read years ago, and also that the political temperament of the time was in favor of a woman's right to choose. The political belief system wasn't in favor of that. And so the argument the conservatives had is essentially that the courts were legislating. They were taking away rights that belong to the states. So it's something that, so I don't necessarily agree with that. In some cases, I think they have, but in this particular case, I don't think they did. But I'm not a justice on the Supreme Court. Okay, so I can't undo what's been done. The other thing is this will be politicized because it's an election year. Okay, it'll be politicized also because it's an important issue. Okay, so I'm not trying to make light of it. I'm not just saying it's politicized because it's an election year. It's an important issue, and I think it's interesting because you are seeing administrations advocating for people to demonstrate, and I've almost never seen this in my lifetime. Even in the original video I made, even then I was looking at demonstrations that occurred in the 60s, but I never saw the executive branch of government encourage people to demonstrate. In terms of even in terms of civil rights, I never actually saw that. I did see that in terms of, a peaceful protest was tolerated but not encouraged, and certainly not in the case of the Vietnam War. So this is a little bit like the 60s, but a little bit more so. So essentially what you have is this increases the polarization that's been going on, which I think, again, doesn't hit most day-to-day people. It doesn't hit most people walking on the street, or most people you'll talk with. It does hit people who care about these things deeply. And I'm not saying it's right. And I'm not saying that what the generals are doing is right or wrong, but it just seems kind of stupid to say, oh yeah, we've been helping to kill off. Number one, we've decided Roe versus Wade was overreach after 60 years. But this is the first time they had a clear majority. And number two, it doesn't seem sensible to say, oh yeah, we're providing information. So this is so that the Ukrainians could kill off Russian generals. It seems kind of reckless to me. But that's the Sun Rahu conjunction. Okay. It's really kind of a reckless combination. And I think one of the things we're going to see over the next couple of weeks is people backsliding, getting very angry about this, probably continuing through the summer, and probably continuing for about a good 6 to 9 months at least, because essentially eclipse results can be felt for about a good 6 to 9 months. This isn't something that goes away overnight. And luckily we'll only have 4 eclipses this year. We have many more in 2019. And this will be a shift in perspective for the United States overall. And quite frankly, right now, because Saturn's the dominant planet in the United States chart, it'll tilt a little bit more towards progressives. But I think So, but people who vote on this issue won't necessarily be working class, or poor people will tend more to be middle class and upper middle class people who will vote on this issue, just typically. So this Mars-Saturn conjunction down here is a push for progress to help the poor, but it's really, at least from the chart, it's not a big lie that they're helping the poor, but it's really a manipulation. And I think also the fact that we have Jupiter and Venus in the 8th house with this chart means there'll be more secrets coming out over the next couple of months, which will be very embarrassing to government, or to people in positions of power. I like times like these because they let the truth out. I dislike times like these because they cause a lot of disruption in people's lives. And we have problems. We have economic problems. That Jupiter-Venus conjunction indicates an economic problem, and the Sun-Rahu conjunction indicates an economic problem. And we're getting distracted by important issues, but things connected with the pocketbook are going to be more important come November, at least from what I can tell on the chart. The next combination, so we're going to switch over to the lunar eclipse. But again, keep in mind, the United States is not the only country affected by this. Not at all. Okay, so let's go here. And again, you will see public demonstrations for at least the next month or so about this. At least. All right. So this is the lunar eclipse chart. So you see the sun's moved into the next sign. It'll be about 1 degree, 3 minutes of Taurus. And and K2 is close to the moon, right? So this will affect, so I can tell you personally how it's affected me in terms of my chart, and how the eclipse has affected me in terms of my chart. I've had a lot of problems with friends getting sick. And so the sun essentially is an important planet in my chart for those things. So typically what happens when planets are afflicted, there'll be a physical manifestation first. There'll be a philosophical manifestation later, but there'll be a physical manifestation first. And during this particular eclipse, as you can see, Mercury's turning retrograde, right? So this will be it's on May 15th. Sun's just changed signs, just gone over into Taurus. That'll hurt us economically, okay? It'll hurt the world economically. It'll put the United States in a very tough economic position. And we're already seeing, and Saturn's aspecting that particular eclipse too. I'm sorry, Mars is aspecting that particular eclipse too. My apologies. Saturn's aspecting the sun right now, so it's essentially making the government stupid. Mars aspecting the sun will make will make governments aggressive. So if you see demonstrations, you'll actually see hitbacks from government. You'll actually see government strike backs. They'll be restrained because Saturn's in the same sign with Mars. But this particular eclipse will affect Taurus and Scorpio and Libra a little bit, but this will be Libra towards the end of the sign. The solar eclipse was closer to around 16 degrees of Aries, and that would reflect directly down onto Libra. So that would give the problems with governments and the courts. This will give problems with savings and secrets. So, so essentially, what happens here is this will cause an economic shakeup over the next 6 months as well. I've been predicting a recession. It looks like we're already in one. I don't think it's going to be a very long recession, but that depends a lot on what the bankers do, because the bankers are trying to, this is Jupiter and Venus, the bankers give us guidance, the bankers direct monetary policy. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them. My best guess is that, and again, I just really, this is incredible deja vu going back to the late 70s, because essentially they raised interest rates to tighten demand, right, or to to lessen demand, and they thought by that they could reduce inflation. And at least from the way I read things, it really didn't do that. It just threw a lot of people out of work. It lowered gas prices indirectly by making the demand for gas less robust. There was actually a lucky change for President Reagan in the fact that the oil cartels at the time couldn't raise prices anymore because demand was down, and also they really weren't interested in wrecking the world economy anymore. So they just slowly reduced gasoline prices. So the trigger, so there is a trigger between demand for a product and its price, obviously. There's also a trigger between supply of a product and the cost of a product. So if your supply chains are screwed up, which is what happened in 1979 and what happened again in 2021 and 2020, you're going to see prices rise. If you combine that with incentives for borrowing, because you want to see the economy get rolling back again, you'll have inflationary pressure. But if you take one of those things and address it, so essentially what you're doing is when you increase the interest rate, this is just my logic. When you increase the interest rate, it cuts down demand. That'll lower prices. It'll also throw a whole bunch of people out of work. So I think it's really not a good policy. I think right, if I were president, and I'm not, or if I were in control, I would see about ways we could improve the supply chain, both short term and long term. But that isn't going to happen. I'm not president, and I don't think I ever want to be. Okay, so that's and I don't think I would be elected anyway. So it's just kind of interesting, and they were essentially doing this tightening aspect, that Saturn-Mars conjunction. And that's the way we're looking to control inflation. There is a correlation, there is a correlation between, so inflation happens when you have too many dollars going after too few goods. And it's happened many times in the history of the world. This isn't the first time. So let's go back to the chart for right now, and then we'll go to the eclipse chart. Okay? So I'm going to close this down and start up again from experience and see where the parts of the world we should be watching out for are being affected. sorry for the dull economics lecture. I will. A friend of mine encouraged me to do a presentation on serial killers because they're really popular. I don't like serial killers. I don't, but I might do the topic just in the interest of giving folks something they can look at a chart and get to know better. I probably won't do it for a broadcast, but I'll probably do it for a separate chart, a separate show. And so we're back with that moon in the first house. So again, we're talking about women. And let's see, and that's slipped out of the chart. But again, a lot of the issue has to do with ethics, morality, essentially what the law would call us to do. Okay, Jupiter, Venus, Sun, secrets coming out from the government, tactical leaks, what I would call them, Mars, Saturn conjunction, Mercury, political ends, and Moon in the first house, demonstrations. So we have the same kind of a combination. So let's go back to the time and space chart. All right. So parts of the world most strongly affected right now are, we have a Sun and a Rahu line heading over to Hawaii. So there's a little bit of panic in Hawaii, a little bit of inflationary pressure. I would say a lot of inflationary pressure, economic panic in Hawaii as well. Saturn really doesn't intersect anything. It comes closest to Tierra del Fuego in South America, so we're not going to talk about that. But it does look like there's the potential for violence in Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, California, all the way up through Montana. Jupiter, Venus, the central United States looks pretty placid, but there'll be a lot of ethical arguments in this part of the world. And there'll be demonstrations really throughout the United States, especially the eastern United States, because of the moon heading over here. And the moon will be going through South Carolina. And you'll see a lot of disputes, a lot of attention focused on Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida, and also Cuba. Cuba is going through some problems right now as well, from what I understand. And as you get into northern South America, there'll be a lot of world focus on Venezuela, Brazil again. And Brazil is going to face some economic pressure as well over the next few months, and some panic, especially towards the south of Brazil. And also what I would call some government scandals around the Brazilian government. The other thing is we have a Mars line, a Mercury line passing through Brazil as well. So there'll be some, again, more political scandals, more political lying. We have essentially a Mars line passing over near Cape Verde and also close to Azores. So I think you're going to see some kind of violence there or some kind of disruption. I hope not volcanoes, but that's possible. And Iceland has, I have to look at it. It looks like a Jupiter line going through it. And you'll also see Sun Rahu over here. And there's also a Venus line running through England, Ireland, Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. And I think what that means for those countries and down through, I think that what that means for those countries is actually a little bit of peace, a little bit of calmness, but ethical inquiries too. The moon is passing over Eastern Europe, down through Greece and into Algeria, and down into Chad and areas like that. And I think you'll see a lot of public attention focused on that part of the world through South Africa. And finally, as we go over here, we have in Eastern Africa, up through Ethiopia, we have this sun line. So there'll be government disruption all the way through the Arab states, and especially in Iran. Turkey is interesting in that, and Eastern Europe is interesting in that there's nothing really intersecting here. So they'll be caught between, they'll be caught in economic issues, but not quite so violent. And Mercury is, let me just go over here. Mercury is passing over Iran. So you're going to see some political scandals in Iran and in Russia, and also in Pakistan and Afghanistan. There are some Jupiter-Venus lines and some Mars lines running close to India. India has to be careful about conflict with Pakistan, at least according to the way I'm reading this. And there's a Jupiter-Venus line running through, so the rest of India looks okay, though. Maybe some ethical concerns happening, but they actually look okay. And let's see now. We have lines running through Borneo and close to Japan, over Japan, and that's a moon line. So there'll be a lot of public attention on China, Japan, Philippines, Indonesia. And finally, you can see some a nice Saturn line running up through Australia and Japan. So you'll start to see recessionary pressure building in Australia, and some panic, especially along this region of the country, and some impotence on the part of the government in Western Australia. And as far as Eastern Australia, we have political scandals happening in that part of the country. Some potential for violence in Eastern Australia, and it looks like New Zealand is going to return to a more placid state than it's been in recently. So let's look at the map for the eclipse. Let's close this map out. And let me see if I can give you some advice for to strengthen Jupiter. I would recommend fasting on Thursdays. The planet that really needs help in the chart right now is really the sun, because the sun is a little bit weak, and you can do Om Surya Namaha on Sundays 108 times. 10 o'clock in the morning is preferred. And also Durga mantras, which I told you about last week, to propitiate Rahu, or the North Lunar Node. The moon will also be a little bit weak in terms of the May 15th to 16th eclipse. So you might want to give some worship, or give your mother a nice Mother's Day gift this week, or treat an older woman nicely. The moon will be in Scorpio, and that will help alleviate some of the pressure there. It'll also that combination will also tend to increase depression or anxiety. So just be a little bit mindful of that when you're going through that. And you can do Om Sumaya Namaha or Om Chandraya Namaha, mantras for the moon. You should do those on Mondays, though. Okay, so Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, or Sundays are appropriate for that mantra. So essentially, there are some things you can do also. You can surround yourself in whites around the time of the eclipse, around May 15th. That would probably be a good idea. And I'll talk about that a little bit more next week. But surrounding yourself with bright colors, happy thoughts, is always a good idea. And let's see now, Mercury. Don't fret about the Mercury retrograde. Number one, it'll reveal some elemental truths about media. And number two, it will also, and again, I have nothing against the media. I'm just essentially saying that their function, they sell information. They're a merchant service. They've never been a public service. Okay, so it's something. So I can look at, let's see, at my cell phone and say, that's a great device. However, the cell phone manufacturer is going to want to tell me, you should get my cell phone because blah, 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 blah. They're selling a commodity. They're not providing, it's not a public service. You pay for it. Okay. So just keep that in mind. News is not, news is a commodity. Okay. Not saying it's a bad commodity. Food is a commodity too. We need food to survive, right? But you also, if you're a good shopper, you read the ingredients. You're familiar with what you're eating, okay? All right, so this is the lunar eclipse chart. And let's look quickly at what I'm seeing as being essentially good spots and trouble spots. So we have some trouble spots right away in the Southwest United States and Mexico. So this may have something to do with immigration patterns. It may have something to do with violence or exposure of something that's been going on with immigration. The other combinations we have, let's see where the sun and the moon are together. So that's what we want to look for. The sun and the moon are in Turkey, so there'll be a little bit of a panic combination in Turkey up through Bulgaria and through all the way up through Sweden and Norway, or pretty much all the way up through Poland, Sweden, and Norway. So it'll be kind of a panicky situation for those countries. Ukraine still looks like it's afflicted by Saturn. Let's see where else we're having some problems. So there's a sun Rahu conjunction occurring in Japan. That's going to make Japan and also down through Australia and New Guinea. This is Borneo, New Guinea down here. It'll cause some problems for those countries. So there'll be some kind of government panic or government scandal in those areas. So I think these are the three areas I would look for: Western United States, or people affiliated with those parts of the world, Central Europe down to Turkey and Israel and the Middle East and down to Saudi Arabia and a little bit of Iran, and finally over here, over Japan um, New Guinea, and Australia. Okay. All right. So let's go back and see what the week will bring for your individual signs. Okay. So we're going to get out of this, and we're going to get out of this, and go back to the original chart. No, chart. And we're going to go through really quickly. All right. So for Aries, Aries has a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement, but maybe too much excitement, and it may run into a brick wall before the end of the week. So just be prepared to go forward with your ambitions. Don't give them up if you find yourself running into roadblocks at the end of the week. Also, Mercury good for money, good for home life. Relationship life is a little bit blocked or a little bit stymied. Career life actually looks good. There'll be good gains from career life, and spiritual and pleasures of the bed look very good for Aries. But Taurus has Mercury in the first house. It's a well-producing planet for this particular sign, and it'll produce a lot of money coming in from communications. Moon is in the third house. He gives a lot of travel opportunities. And K2 sits in the sixth house, so it has to be careful about illnesses. Mars and Saturn sit in the 10th house, very good for career life and very good for financial gains for the sign. For Gemini, Gemini has Mercury in the 12th house, so this sign will feel like it has to go off into spiritual directions or increase the spiritual energy. But it has Moon in the second house, so it'll be famous or popular. And also with this combination, there'll also be a lot of attention drawn to the sign over the next few days. The Lord of the second house, money will seem to be not enough really until the middle of May. You'll see a change and money will actually start to improve, start to increase. Also keep something in mind, this sign will want a lot of attention paid to its appearance because the moon's in the second house. So it wants to be very, very public. And let's see now. K2 is in the fifth house, so some problems with children. That's going to show up over the next year or so. And Saturn's in the ninth house with Mars, gives ability to overcome enemies, luck from enemies. Venus and Jupiter are in the 10th house. When you see that kind of a combination, essentially the chart is somewhat blessed. So new activities tend to be really, really good. And again, the Lord of the third house is in the 11th house, gives good travel opportunity, gives good potential for fame. Mercury in the 12th, again, a lot of attention overseas or in other countries. For Cancer, the Lord of Cancer is in the first house, that's the moon. Let's see now. Mars is in the 8th house. So I want to go to that first because Mars is what's called a Raj Yoga Karaka planet, or a special union making planet for the sign. So a lot of partnerships will tend to fall apart or feel like they're a little bit unstable or underground. But Mercury aspects the 5th house in the chart. This sign will get help from friends, and also it will get a certain amount of notoriety or public recognition because of the Sun Rahu conjunction. The K2 in the 4th house, some disagreements or conflicts with family members over really what I would call insignificant things. And let's see now. Nice combination, Venus and Jupiter in the 9th house, extremely good for luck. career life will be extremely strong for this chart, and financial gains will be extremely strong as well. So this is for a person who has rising sign, sun, or moon sign in that particular sign according to Indian astrology. For Leo, the first lord is in the ninth house, which is actually a good placement. It's exalted. Again, a little bit out of touch with reality, a little bit overly ambitious, a little bit maybe too dynamic or too aggressive. And it'll sort of hit a frustration point towards the end of the week around the time of the eclipse. Don't let that deter you. That won't last long unless you let it last long. But you will have a lot of ambitions, but you'll feel them frustrated for about the next 6 months to a certain extent. But if you stay with them, you'll achieve them within about 6 months' time. Mercury, Lord of the second house, is in the 10th house, so it gives good income from career. And Mars and Saturn are in the 7th house, so relationship life will be troubled or difficult or overly picky. Jupiter and Venus are in the 8th house. That's a good combination for unexpected legacies from relationship partners or gains. And this combination, even though I've been really talking negatively about it, isn't all that bad. It just means that you'll have fame, but some of your goals may have to be delayed a little bit. Mercury and the 10th house, again, good for communication skills, good for meeting the public. For Virgo, Virgo has Venus, Mercury, Jupiter in the 7th house. That's very good. It'll make this sign super lucky over the next couple of weeks. And especially in terms of romantic relationships, geez, it'll introduce you to a lot of special people, so that's good. Mars and Saturn are, and also good business partners. Mars and Saturn are in the 6th, so again, it's just a little bit of a drag on the person. They'll feel a little bit overwhelmed by the level of responsibility. The Lord of the first house is in the 9th house. That's very good. It's very good for general luck. Might change a little bit this coming week because of the retrograde, but still it's not a bad placement at all. Sun is in the 8th house along with Rahu, so there'll be hidden things that'll come up out of the person's past or out of the person's connections with the government. And Moon is in the 11th house. New friends, change of friends. Friends will be leaving. Some friends will be leaving. New ones will be coming in. Libra has Rahu and Sun in the 7th house, so there's a lot of dissatisfaction on relationship partners' part. Doesn't mean the marriage is heading towards the rocks. It just means so the person's a little bit dissatisfied. And Mars and Saturn are in the 5th house. This is a good combination. This is actually a wealth-producing combination for this rising sign. So there'll be gains from property, although slow. And Venus and Jupiter are really well placed in the 6th house. So this sign will actually benefit from work. Mercury and Venus are hemming in the 7th house for Libra. I just want to go back to that for a second. But that'll essentially make this chart lucky in love. 10th house career life is changing. Okay. So there'll be a change for the better career-wise. Scorpio has Mars and Saturn in the 4th house, so there'll be a lot of attention placed on home life or on structural issues. Jupiter and Venus are in the 5th house, so this sign will be more generous than normal. Sun is in the 6th house. He'll be worried about his health, worried about his friends. And Mercury's in the 6th house. Some tendency towards being taken in through lies or through people being deceitful. And let's see what else. K2 is in the 12th house, so more spiritual activity for this sign. For Sagittarius, and I have to wrap this up pretty quickly. Sagittarius has Mars and Saturn will have a lot of courage this month. Venus and Jupiter, a lot of happiness at home. Sun is in the fifth. Children difficult to please. Mercury in the sixth. Wife difficult to please, or wife may depart, or husband may depart. And career will be an area of some strife. Friends will be a little bit unusual or a little bit non-supportive. For Capricorn, the Lord of the first house and the second house is the money-making house, along with Mars. So this indicates gains through real estate or through hard assets or through hard work. Mercury and Venus are in the third house. Again, this sign will seem very diplomatic. Sun and Rahu are in the fourth house. A little bit difficult because it'll seem like no matter what you do, home-wise, you won't please anybody. And career-wise, you'll also have some problems getting recognized. Moon is in the seventh house. Change in relationship life or change in relationship matters. Probably more coming through the summertime, but I think overall you'll see a change and new relationship opportunities. A lot of one planness at work, focus at work, but not a lot of recognition. For Aquarius, Mars and Saturn are in the first house, so this sign's going to be very tough on itself over the next month or so. And Jupiter and Venus are in the second house, very good for financial progress or financial growth. Sun and Rahu are in the third house. This sign will do everything it can to promote itself. Mercury's in the fourth house. There's some progress being made in terms of building activities, and you'll see a lot of building activities come to a conclusion at the end of the month or in early June. And finally, Moon is in the sixth house as Lord of the sixth house. So overall health is good. K2 is in the ninth house, so the person will detach or isolate themselves from their teachers. For Pisces, Jupiter-Venus conjunction in the first house, very positive. This sign will be very optimistic. It'll be also a little bit bossy, though, because of Sun in Aries, conjunct with Rahu. And Mercury's in the third house. It won't have the courage to pursue what it really wants to pursue, unfortunately. Moon is in the fifth house, good for luck through children. And K2 is in the eighth house. This gives more interest in metaphysical subjects or esoteric subjects. And 10th house Lord Jupiter is in the first, so this sign will be focused a great deal on career, but there will be housing expenses and also expenses connected with friendships. So that's it for this week. I hope everyone's doing terrific. It's not really that bad a chart. I would pay attention to those remedies that I gave you. Mantra repetition should be 108 times and done in a quiet place and facing east or north for best results. The moon mantra can be done in the morning, first thing in the morning. It doesn't have to be done at 10 a.m. Every mantra can be done early in the morning. 10 a.m. is just a recommended time for sun mantras. So that's it for this week. I love you all. Stay healthy, stay blessed, and I'll see you next week. Namaste. I love you all. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Bye, everyone. 508-525-0001.